Hello, everybody, and welcome to Faster Masters Rowing Radio. This is a new podcast series that I'm doing with Marlene Royle. Marlene's here with me today. Hey, Marlene.
Hi, Rebecca. Nice to be here. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everybody. Now, our goal with this new podcast is to provide monthly updates for people who are masters and are into rowing, with some things that you can try and do and things that you might want to test out. And ultimately, in the future, we hope you'll tell your friends and send us questions and things that you want answered. So, Marlene, let's kick off with, what's your January inspiration for everybody?
I think one of the things I read recently that was very inspirational was Karen Davies' article about her coach, Tom Terhar. And Tom Terhar is the U.S. women's coach of the Olympic 8 and the U.S. women's national team. And Karen is a multiple-time gold medalist in the women's 8. And she wrote a terrific article in the online magazine Row 360 about rowing for Tom and the relationship between an athlete as a coach and a coach. And I thought it was very interesting because she explained so much the importance of the professionalism of a coach, and sometimes coaches have to be quiet and they have to be distant with their athletes in order to observe them, in order to make good decisions about selection. And I think she expressed really well between the lines what it's like to be an athlete that's in a camp situation, who is in a selection process situation all the time. And, I was thinking about this and saying, well, when you're on a competitive team, whether it's a master's team or a university team or a national team, you have your goals and you're pursuing your goals, but you're also really making yourself vulnerable because you're under the scrutiny of somebody who's going to make the decisions of whether you're boated for the next regatta or a key regatta, and whether you're not. And you have to develop a lot of trust in that person, which can be difficult sometimes when you're tired or when you're putting yourself under great pressure, and not learning to trust that coach 100% and just understand that coach is going to make the best decisions and you go with it. And I thought this article really, really explained that relationship and how to cope with it really well, and what you as an athlete need to expect from a coach, and what a coach who's trying to make the best decisions for the team. And if your goal is to win that gold medal in that event, the requirements for that. So I thought it's a very good article and certainly worth reading, especially for those athletes and masters who row in very competitive programs where there is a selection. And, I think, as I said, your vulnerabilities as an athlete, as a person, you have to put it all out there and just say, hey, I'm going to go with this. Otherwise, you don't have a chance. You must take the risk to be able to then achieve those goals. But it was a very, very good article, which I think expresses what many of us feel when you're in a selection process and you have to go with whatever the result of that decision making is.
And of course, I interviewed Karen Davies on my Rowing Chat podcast, and I'll put a link to both the article and the Karen Davies interview in the show notes. So if you want to pick up on either of those, you can.
That would be terrific. And I actually think that that's one of my favorite interviews that you did, is the interview you did with Karen Davies. So I highly recommend when somebody puts on their earbuds on the erg to tune into that podcast. It's a really, really terrific podcast.
Now, you mentioned the erg, Marlene, and of course, in North America, it's winter, and a lot of people can't row because they're iced in. So they're going to be spending a lot of more time on the rowing machine. How can you make erging fun?
I personally like the erg, and I think the erg is an excellent training tool, and if you approach it that way, if you're thinking about your goals for next season, the erg can be fun because it's like putting money in the bank. I think every meter you row, every piece that you do, you're putting money into your training bank. And when you get to race day next August or next October, depending on your distance, you have that savings to rely on. I think in the winter, you have to keep it interesting. And one of the things I was thinking about when we were talking about this earlier is create your own erg studio and put your erg in a beautiful spot in your house. Like, I personally have my erg in the nicest room in the house, where I look out a huge picture window. I look over a birch forest with a pond, and the deer walk up to the door, and it's just a really pleasant room with a lot of light. And I think that that's important. Or if you can look out over water or look out over the river. But so many people send me videos of them rowing on the erg, and they're rowing in a garage with paint cans around them, and junk in the garage, and shelves behind them. And that's, to me, that's the equivalent of digital clutter. And I think creating, even if you have to erg in your garage, buy a room divider and section off a little area that has some nice light, and that has maybe your sound system with some nice speakers and a carpet, and create a pleasant environment. And I think that's the first step to making the erg fun, is be someplace where you like being, instead of down in the basement in the corner where there's spiders and things like that. So making creative, picking creative workouts. You may row for a team or have a coach who gives you your workouts, so you don't have to think about that. But if you're somebody who doesn't have a program designed for you, create challenges for yourself. For example, if you row on a Concept 2, you can go into the Concept 2 world ranking, and they're all different distances. And maybe you test yourself at 3 or 4 of those distances, and you see, where am I in the percentile rankings? Where am I for 1,000 meters? Where am I for the marathon? Where am I for the 500 meters? And I think if you do a battery of those distances, you can see where your strengths lie and where your weaknesses lie. If you're in the top, say, 10% in your 1K, but you're in the 50th percentile for your 5K, then you can see, well, that 5K needs some work to bring you up to the level of your 1K. So that's one way to set up a little challenge for yourself. And, I think you need a long-term goal for the winter, something specific, like I'm going to improve my 1K by 5 seconds. But you also need some subjective goals. Let's use a 1K test as an example, since we're masters, and that's what we tend to focus on. You may want to say, I want to be able to row this at race pace at even splits. And that might be your challenge. That's your training challenge. And I think that's one of the beauties of the erg, because it's so controllable, even for your long distance rowing. Say you're rowing at stroke rate 18 or stroke rate 20 for 40 minutes or 60 minutes. The job there is to keep it absolutely consistent. If you're going to sit on a 2:15 pace, you want to sit on a 2:15 pace and learn to keep that consistent, versus the numbers jumping all over the place. Because that consistency that you learn in the wintertime and you use as a subjective challenge goal, you can take that skill to the boat in the springtime. And developing power at low rates. You don't have to be at race pace to get some very good benefit from working at, improving your power at stroke grade 18, and then being able to take that improved drive to stroke grade 20 and to stroke grade 22. Again, we want to develop skills that give us better qualities rowing in the boat. So setting up little challenges, I think, are important to make it fun, make it interesting. But I think everything you do should relate to your goals. And when somebody tells me that the erg is boring, the first thing I think of is, that person probably doesn't have a very clear goal. Because I think if you have a clear goal when you're rowing on the erg, even if you just think from a technical point of view, you can be focusing on the consistent pressure against the foot plate. You can be focusing on consistent pressure of the handle against your fingers. You can be focusing on your posture and your sequencing on the recovery, your head position. Are your lats engaged? Are your glutes working? These are all things that you have time to work on the erg. And if you're paying attention to those technical points, I don't think you have time to be bored.
I certainly can relate to that. It reminds me of one particularly challenging session I did years ago, where it was early morning. I couldn't go on the water for some reason, went to the boathouse, and it was so mentally hard to do. And I was in London, and we ended up, it was a very clear night, and I could see the landing lights of the aeroplanes coming in to Heathrow Airport. And so I was doing a long, steady piece, and I was watching these aeroplane lights come basically across the sky that I could see really, really clearly. And so I started timing them. I was timing them off of the likely 60-minute piece I was doing. And I can tell you that there's an aeroplane every 90 seconds lands at Heathrow Airport. I also then started a new challenge, which was how many sequences of tail lights could I see in a row? And I got up to 5, I think, that I could actually see with the naked eye while keeping my consistency, keeping my split, trying to keep my technique. And believe me, time passed really fast.
Absolutely. And it sounds cliche, and we talk about this in racing, but you can only row one stroke at a time. And I think when you're training, especially when you're relegated indoors and you can't get on the water, and even if you live in the US, even if you live in the South, you've got lots of days with wind that you can't row. Even if you live on the West Coast in California, you still have a season of wind and rain. Just because you don't have ice, it doesn't mean that you can always get on the water. So the erg does become important. And I think if you have a choice, if you want to be better at rowing, you need to row. And the erg is the next best thing to being on the water. And yes, as masters, it's important to include some cross training when you need it as recovery. But if you don't need it, you're better off to row. I think if you want to row better, you need to row. You need to work on these things. But you don't want to multitask too much when you need to focus on one stroke at a time. And you can set up, like you were saying, you set up small goals. Maybe your goal is, for this minute, I focus on this technical aspect. For this minute, I focus on this. For this minute, I focus on this. So it can also become an exercise in concentration, which is very important when we get on the race course. If you have to row a 600 stroke head race and you don't have concentration and you're looking out of the boat every 3 strokes, you're probably not going to be very effective for your crew. So, and it's a great time, I think, to listen to inspirational podcasts. That's one time when it helps. You can learn something. Maybe you listen to rowing chats, maybe you listen to some other training podcasts or something you want to learn. As long as I think you don't have to do something that the intervals are too high, that they really require very, very hard concentration. If you're doing a distance row that you need 60 or 75 minutes, that's a great time to listen to a podcast or watch the news or have something there. In that sense, I think you can multitask, but not when you get up to the higher intensities. I think you have to just focus on what you're doing.
When we're training in the boat shed together, our group, and we have a long piece like that, what we usually do is we ask each of the people in the room to think of one technical focus that they want. And so what we do is we then have each 5 minutes, we take it in turns. We just go down the line and you go, right, Karen, it's your 5 minutes now. Gordon, your 5 minutes. And then they holler out, they've told you in advance, but then they remind you what the focus is. And then we're all supporting them in the thing that they want to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned goal setting for winter. And of course, I'm thinking we've come off Christmas, we've come off New Year. Speaking for myself, I overindulged. Marlene, have you got any tips for how to shift your Christmas pounds and get back into the body weight that you want to be at for the rest of the year?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is just say that you had a really good time over the holidays and just ease yourself back into your athletic lifestyle. Small steps count, and you don't have to, I think, shift into a really strict regime, but start paying attention to what you're doing. And of course, first that's going to begin with your diet, because if you're going to lose weight, no matter what all the fad diets say, you simply have to take in less calories than you burn. And you may, if you're not completely back on your training schedule yet, trim your calories 15%. And, there's a couple tricks and ways that you can do this without feeling like you're on a diet, because Nancy Clark, the sports nutrition, she says the first 3 letters in the word diet are die. So diets probably don't really work, but you do have to change habits, and changing habits is different. But some little steps that you can take is, as far as paying attention to what you eat, start using smaller plates. When your eyes see a smaller plate full, your eyes think, oh, I have a whole plate full of food. If you have a large plate full of food, you're going to eat more calories than if you have a smaller plate full of food. And eat with a smaller fork. And in between bites, set your fork down so that you eat slower. Also, more contrast of color on your plate. The more contrast of color there is, the slower people will tend to eat, as well as variety. The more variety you have available to you, the more you'll tend to eat, versus if you have soup and salad. If you have a soup, a salad, a sandwich, and a dessert, you're probably going to eat more than if you just have the soup and a sandwich. Eating slower, stick to your whole foods. And, I think just staying away from packaged food and just eating good old healthy foods, whole foods, is the way to go. And there's if you're on the road or you're traveling, you can certainly grab some almonds, you can grab an apple or a banana. There's lots of ways you can avoid the junk food with hidden calories in it. Drink more water. That's a very, very important factor for your hydration, but also in the sense of reducing some weight. Oftentimes when you think you're hungry, you're actually just dehydrated. So when you feel a little hunger pain, maybe first drink some water, then wait for 10 minutes and see if you still feel like eating, because in fact, you may just need to be more hydrated. And start getting enough sleep, because during the holidays, you probably are running on a deficit because you've been going to parties or you've had house guests, and house guests can take up a lot of energy that replaces your training time. So getting back on your sleep schedule is important, so that you now have the energy to get back to training, and just just start doing the work again. if you haven't been training, if you've missed a lot of days, maybe you're not ready to go back to 6 days or a week or 5 days, but for a week or two, get back to 4 days, then get back up to your 5 times a week or 6 times a week, whatever your norm is. But I think, just ease yourself back into your routine with small steps, and just, be mindful of what you're doing from day to day.
I have a couple of my own tips. I totally endorse what you're saying. One of them is to remember that it takes 20 minutes after you've eaten to stop feeling hungry. So eating more slowly basically means that you can be slower in getting to the point of feeling satiated. Whereas if you eat fast, obviously you tend to eat more before you feel satiated.
Absolutely.
The other is have an accountability partner. Buddy up with someone, like one of the girls I row with, she's away in her holiday house at the moment, and she's taken an erg to the batch at the beach, and we text each other each day and complain about our inability to complete my program. This is normal for us. And then I also personally weigh myself every morning, so I know how much I can eat that day relative to my weight goal. And I use a little app just to record what I eat. So it's real simple stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think in terms of your fuel intake, I mean, especially if you're a training athlete, I mean, food fundamentally is fuel. I mean, though we'd like to enjoy food, and, it's very social, and, I'm a bit of a peasant gourmet cook myself, so I actually grow quite a bit of my own salad stuff, and I make everything from scratch at home. So I buy just basically raw ingredients, and whatever we're having, I make it from scratch. That's one of the benefits of working at home. But yes, that's important. And remember that if you have to put fuel in the tank before you're going to drive your car to the next city. So front loading your calories in the day to burn those calories during the day, does make a difference, especially when you're looking at your carb intake from a pure fuel point of view. It's going to help fuel your workout. It's going to help you recover from your workout. And then, other types of foods, protein, etc., are for repair. And you can time those foods so that it works most effectively for your body too. And if you're training in the morning, then it's probably important that you have some kind of good meal to replace your energy after training. If you don't train in the afternoon, then you're better off probably to stay away from more starchy things and focus more on your protein and your non-starchy vegetables at night, and focus on foods that have low calorie densities, green vegetables, soups, as long as they're clear soups. Things that have higher water content also can help you not feel like you're dieting and you still enjoy your food, but lower calorie density. Because I think that there is a factor of crunch. And, everyone's accustomed to, when you sit down at the table, they're accustomed to eating for a certain number of minutes. And I think your body probably doesn't easily want to change that number of minutes, but if you replace it with food that's a little bit lower calorie, that's what I call it, the crunch factor, more salad, more crunchy vegetables, things like that. I think, again, it has that feeling of being more satisfying than just eating sort of a small portion of something and then you eat in much less time. So, if that's when you and your friends sit and talk in the evening or catch up on the day, if you're having dinner with your family, I think that's another factor to put in there, is just, what's your normal time you spend at the table? And, when you're finished eating, just get up and change locations.
That's such a good bit of advice. And if you are going to have something like some ice cream or whatever, that's cool. Just take it out of the carton, put it in a bowl, take the bowl to the table, put the carton back in the freezer.
Yes, yes. Never eat anything out of its packaging. That's a really important rule. And you know, I think it's important to think of your, whether it's your sleep pattern, whether it's your eating pattern, it's your training pattern. Just if you need to create a new habit, take one step and try to solidify that habit. And you know, I don't think that you have to live in a state of deprivation to lose those few extra pounds. Or if you say this year, you know, I really need to lose 10 pounds to be at my racing weight for August. Just, you know, if you like to have ice cream, have a little bit every day or have a little bit a few times a week versus feeling deprived and then having a whole bunch at one time. You know, just enjoy the things you enjoy. Just, you know, keep an eye on what you're doing.
That's excellent advice. So thanks, Marlene. Great tips. Quick recap. How to make erging fun. January inspiration from the Karen Davies article and the Karen Davies rowing chat interview. Using the erg technically for your preparation to going back on the water. A reminder of your goals that you're setting as part of the context for your training. And lastly, shifting those Christmas pounds. Now, Rowing Chat has a new website, which is rowing.chat. If you'd like to get an alert when there's a new episode for you to listen to or to watch, because we are still recording this in video as well as audio, please go to the site and throw your email address in and subscribe. And you'll automatically just get a quick note with links to what we've published. Any final words, Marlene?
I think use January as a month to really get in some good volume. Think of creating, January is the month for creating the base of your pyramid, which is going to help you work up towards the peak of the pyramid, which will maybe come in May if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, or in August if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. But winter goes by very, very quickly, and don't delay. Start tomorrow.
Fantastic, inspirational words. We'll let you know next month when our Faster Masters Rowing Radio podcast is going to be on. Till next time, just tell your friends about us. See you soon. Bye-bye.